Hello and welcome to a new episode of Germany in Focus, a news podcast made possible by members of The Local. Today we're talking about the funding row threatening the future of the €49 transport ticket. With the Bavarian state elections coming up on October the 8th, we'll profile the southern state and explain the politics around it. Why are so many people attracted to come to Berlin, both in the past and now? We'll hear from author John Kampfner, who's written a book about the German capital. And lastly, we'll talk about some false friends that German and English speakers find tricky about each other's languages. I'm Rachel Loxton, and I'm in Berlin today with journalists Imogen Goodman and Burnett. Hello.
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 How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, our weather's turning a bit cooler, which is not something I'm going to complain about at the moment.
No, it is feeling very autumnal at the moment. So we had that extra month of summer, which was great. But now I'm noticing all the cold season things starting to happen. Flu season and slightly worryingly COVID season as well. Our friendship, our group chat on WhatsApp is just sort of awash with people saying they've got COVID infections at the moment. So that's something that seems to be a reality again, unfortunately.
That's really bad. Are they having it really, getting really ill, or is it kind of mild?
I think it's relatively mild. I don't think it's the kind of week in bed that we saw last time, but I think people are just feeling a bit sluggish, run down. Mm-hmm. So I'd say if you do start just feeling like you're not yourself, definitely get a test because it could well be COVID.
Definitely. And Aaron, I really want to ask you, how are your Tuesday evenings going?
They're booked out for the next month or so, for sure.
Please share.
Yeah, well, that's because we finally have a Drag Race Germany, and I'm a huge fan of the various editions of Drag Race. RuPaul's very successful franchise finally has a German edition. And we have 11 queens, 7 from Germany, 2 from Switzerland and Austria each. So it's a bit of a drag race Dach going on there. And they're competing for a top prize on the show of €100,000. So a nice big prize pot. For drag and drag race lovers, it's a great way to practice your German.
Ooh.
Yeah. Many local LGBTQ bars have viewing parties on Tuesday nights. So I'm typically at one of those. Some, like Berlin's Schwutz, even have one of the contestants co-host every week. They have a new one come in.
That's so cool.
Every week, yeah. And next week we have Pandora Knox coming up from Vienna, so that's exciting. One of the front runners there, yeah. And I've actually met Berlin's Yvonne Nightstand, who's great. Yeah. I know, great name, great local queen. She's very talented. She's no stranger to making her own very cool outfits. She had one this week that was all 90s and rave.
Wow.
It was absolutely amazing. Best wishes to her and to all the contestants this season for sure.
Really great, because keen listeners will know how much Aaron loves Drag Race. So we love that there's a German one now. We should all go check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with what's been in the news. Germany's €49 monthly travel pass, the successor to the €9 ticket, launched in May, and it's been credited for increasing the number of people on public transport. But there is a big argument over the funding, and German states have been saying without more financial support from the government, they will have to increase the price or even get rid of the ticket in the coming years. Imogen, first of all, can you tell us about how things are going with this ticket?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's kind of a very two-sided story at the moment. So on the one hand, this ticket has been really popular. 3 months after it launched, so at the start of August, there were stats that came out saying 11 million subscriptions for this ticket had been set up just in those first 3 months. So that really shows that there is this huge appetite there for this kind of offer. Deutsche Bahn has also reported that there's 25% more passengers on their trains, which is really one of the goals of the ticket, get people excited about public transport. So that really does seem to be working. And Transport Minister Volker Wissing has called it a bombastic success. So I really, yes, he's definitely excited about it. Unfortunately, though, on the other hand, things have hit a bit of a bump in the road, and it's not 100% clear if the ticket will actually survive in its current form. next year and the year after. That's because there is another funding row about how and who is going to be funding this ticket into the future. So the federal and state governments are both saying that they don't want to take on the full costs of this over the coming years, and they've kind of reached a bit of a deadlock.
When is the funding in place until, and what is the problem with how they're working it out for next year and the following years?
Well, you might actually remember that this kind of was a sticking point to begin with. It's one of the reasons that we didn't see the launch of the €49 ticket until May this year.
Right.
But they eventually, the state and federal governments, Volker Wissing and the other transport ministers did come to an agreement to fund the ticket this year and in the coming years, so until 2025. This year, both sides have put in €1.5 billion, and they've also crucially agreed to compensate the local transport companies for any losses they incur from running the €49 ticket, and they've agreed to split this equally. Now, this €1.5 billion funding from each side, that's going to continue. What is not so clear is if this compensation for the losses of the transport companies will also go on in 2024 and 2025. Neither side seems willing to fund this completely, and Volker Wissing is saying that no further funding will come from the federal government for this. So it's just unclear what's going to happen, all really, really up in the air right now, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be a resolution anytime soon.
What kind of things could we expect happening to the ticket? Do you think it will go away? That would be really sad.
It would be incredibly sad. As I say, this is popular. People are excited about it. Other countries are now looking at Germany and saying, oh, this is, a really exciting thing. Could we do a similar thing kind of in our countries? So, there's an estimated €1.1 billion financial black hole next year. And if there is no way for this to be filled, or if Volker Wissing doesn't agree to include some federal funding for that, there are kind of three scenarios we might expect. So one is that the states simply say, we'll cover this cost ourselves. That does not seem to be something they're particularly keen to do right now. I don't think the political will for that is there. Another option might be that the transport companies simply reduce their costs. They say, okay, we're running fewer services because we've got to find this money somewhere. The other thing that's kind of been pitched as an idea, which I think will be about as unpopular as COVID, or about as popular as COVID, I should say, is that the ticket goes up to €59. And this is just, is it still the €49 ticket then? Well, no, it's not. It's almost as expensive as a normal abo. It's lost its USP. It's suddenly just sort of creeping back up into this realm where actually it's not a particular sort of exciting offer anymore. So if that happens, maybe it is the death knell of the €49 ticket as we know it.
That's actually more expensive than a lot of the abos. For example, the 10 a.m. ticket ones.
It is. So, I mean, really what I think we're all hoping for is that this will be resolved some way, that Volker Wissing will relent. But given that he actually didn't turn up to a special meeting of transport ministers earlier this week, it just doesn't seem like he's that excited about solving this issue. He's that keen to compromise. That said, we do have a meeting of transport ministers on October 12th, so watch this space. Perhaps there will be a compromise on the horizon.
Are any states kind of looking at putting in their own resolution for this?
Well, that is the silver lining, I suppose, even if things are looking quite gloomy with the €49 ticket. So last week, we saw that the very popular €29 ticket offer in Berlin is going to be reintroduced next year. Bavaria is currently looking at doing this. So even if the €49 ticket is under threat, there's the possibility that these local budget offers, so more on a regional basis, will continue.
The difference with that is, of course, that you could only ride the public transport in a certain area. With Berlin, it's the AB, which is the central area.
Absolutely. So the flexibility that you get there with the Deutschland ticket obviously isn't there. That said, maybe people who are just normal commuters in their city might find those regional offers to be exactly what they need.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Imogen. Before we carry on with our chat, I'd like to ask that you consider supporting our podcast by becoming a member of The Local. We are an independent media outlet, and your support is what allows us to produce the news and all of the cultural and practical explainer articles that we write, and it allows us to do this podcast. If you'd like to join, you can find a link to a special offer for podcast listeners in the show notes, or you can access it directly at thelocal.de/podcast offer. Okay, let's move on. As we mentioned last week, two German states, Hesse and Bavaria, are voting for a new state parliament this Sunday, October the 8th. Today, we're going to talk about Bavaria and listen to last week's episode if Hesse is more your thing. Aaron, what's going on with Bavarian politics right now? What's the situation looking like?
Well, ladies, Bavarian politics are rarely boring at the best of times. And a lot of that has to do with its ruling party, the Conservative Christian Social Union, or CSU, and the rather unique place it holds in German politics. It is the Bavarian sister party to the Christian Democrats, or the CDU. The CDU does not run candidates in Bavaria, and the CSU only runs candidates in Bavaria.
Oh.
Yeah, so together they make up the Union federally, or the Union, and agree a joint chancellor candidate for every federal election. A CSU candidate has actually run for chancellor twice, in 1982 and in 2002, losing both times. They act as one party in the Bundestag between the two Union parties, but they are in fact two parties. And sometimes you will see this laid really, really bare, and it will become very, very obvious. Angela Merkel, the previous CDU leader and chancellor, had a reputation for being a moderate, cool, calm, collected individual. Current CSU leader Markus Söder, though, who leads the government in Bavaria, has the exact opposite personality in so many ways. And we've spoken about this on the podcast before, some of the things that he said. He mirrors the CSU that way. It's a more populist party. It tends to be more conservative than the CDU on social issues, on immigration. And Söder himself is noted for both his charisma and his gaffes. He's bombastic that way. The CSU, though, have governed Bavaria, ladies, forget this, 73 out of the last 77 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And for 47 of those years, they've had an absolute majority. So they've not had to govern with a coalition partner. That's a pretty rare thing
So they're
in
really dominant.
German politics. Yeah. I mean, there's some states, Thüringen comes to mind right away. Even federally, we have a three-party coalition, for example, where, some states and federally we have three-party coalitions. And here in Bavaria, we have one party that's been so dominant for such a long time. But Söder did actually lose a majority like that, an absolute majority at the last election in 2018. And he has to govern with another conservative party. And those are the Free Voters, or the Freie Wähler. And he's had to do that for the last 5 years. Its leader, Hubert Aiwanger, was recently linked to a far-right pamphlet written in the 1980s. Despite all of this, though, the polls show that not much has changed for the CSU this time around. They're at 36% in current polls, about where they were last election. The Free Voters are up from 12 to 15% if polls are to be believed, as are the Greens and the AfD. This is still a conservative state. There's every chance it will remain so with the exact same coalition as is governing right now. And the CSU will probably still remain influential within its Union federally at the national level with CDU.
So the Free Voters have not been damaged by this scandal, it seems.
It doesn't appear so, at least not yet. I mean, we'll see what happens on polling day, of course, but no, it doesn't look like it.
Can you tell us a bit about the state, Aaron? How many people live there? How many foreigners? What the big issues are?
Yeah, so Bavaria is the largest German federal state by land area. That probably comes as no surprise to anyone who's looked at a map of Germany. But it is one federal state out of 16, yet it comprises a full fifth of the total land area of Germany. It's the second largest by population. It has 13 million people. Only North Rhine-Westphalia is larger that way. It also has the second highest number of foreigners who live in any German state. 2.2 million residents of Bavaria are foreigners. It's got the country's third largest city in Munich, and other ones include Nuremberg and Augsburg, of course. It's naturally rich with the Alps. It's culturally rich with a distinct accent and Bavarian identity. And Catholics outnumber Protestants there, and that's actually fairly unusual for a German state, which is part of the CSU dominance as well. They consider themselves a party rooted in Catholic tradition.
Mm-hmm. What about the economy? How rich is Bavaria?
Very rich. It has noted German brands like BMW and Audi. They have their HQs there. It has the second largest economy in Germany. It pays a lot into equalization payments that get redistributed among German states. It's not unusual to hear a Bavarian politician like Markus Söder try to score a few political points by bemoaning the amount of Bavarian money that Berlin gets. The CSU has often in the past rallied votes by saying that a strong government in Munich helps prevent rich Bavaria from being shafted by Berlin and having its tax money spent unwisely. Issues from this campaign specifically include whether Bavaria should defy the federal heat pump law and allow gas and oil heating to still be built from 2024, whether Bavaria should have a €29 transport ticket, as we've been talking about just now, whether it should get rid of land transfer tax for people buying their own homes, and even whether shops should be allowed to stay open after 8 p.m. I think this is funny, being those of us who live in Berlin, where grocery stores are regularly open till
6 in the morning.
PM.
Well, yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's so early.
That's one of the things I notice whenever I go to Bavaria is the number of grocery stores that shut at 8.
I noticed that last time I was in Munich. And it's funny that you talk about that relationship between Bavaria and Berlin as well, because on a personal level, I have a friend whose friends back in Bavaria, whose schoolmates regularly say, we pay our taxes so that you can party in Berlin. I think that's sort of the narrative.
Yeah. Bavaria works Berlin parties.
Can we expect any surprises then from this election?
Well, Markus Söder is known to have a talent for sticking his finger up in the air to see which way the wind is blowing, especially when it comes to policy. So there could always be some surprise changes. Politically, though, probably no big surprises, but there could be some consequences nationally.
Please share. What are the implications for the federal government?
Well, despite the CDU's current lead in federal polls, its leader right now, Friedrich Merz, is prone to gaffes and controversies. I mean, Markus Söder is also prone to those, but he seems to somehow be able to shake them off a little bit better than Merz, no?
Yeah, I think people want to go for a beer with Markus Söder.
Yeah, which is part of his appeal, an Oktoberfest beer.
Exactly.
While he's dressed as Shrek. If Markus Söder does well enough here, he could make an argument that he's a sure bet as a chancellor candidate for the union in 2025. Remember that the CDU and CSU agree on a joint candidate. And so far, a CSU candidate seems to have a shot every 20 years. We know that behind the scenes that Markus Söder was trying for that in 2021. Every chance he could try for it again. 2002 was the last time. Söder might say, look, I've got executive experience. I already lead one of the country's most important states. My approval ratings are higher than yours. Sorry about it. And the CSU is due a shot right now. So watch that space. For the Greens, Social Democrats, and Free Democrats that make up the current federal coalition, they'll be looking not to lose too much support in Bavaria, although the FDP might end up not making the threshold in Bavarian state parliament, and that could spell some problems for them nationally.
Thank you so much for that, Aaron. Okay, let's move on. Germany is hosting the UEFA European Championship Football Tournament, or the Euros, next summer. And the first tickets have just gone on sale. So the Euros start on June the 14th next year, and they last for a month. Imogen, a lot of people will be interested in coming to Germany for this. How can people get tickets, and what else can you tell us about the tickets?
Well, as you mentioned, so on Tuesday this week, the 3rd, the first round of ticket sales kicked off. And that's all happening on the official UEFA Euros website. So that's where you need to go if you want to get tickets. This first phase is basically running till October 26th. So don't worry if you haven't got in yet. It doesn't matter when you apply. You can apply until October 26th. The reason I say apply and not buy tickets is that it's very, very likely that this will go to a lottery. So there are 1.2, exactly, I know, exciting, big prizes to win. So there are 1.2 million tickets available in this round, but it's very, very likely that there's going to be far more applications than tickets. So UEFA have promised what they say will be a fair and transparent draw in December to allocate the tickets. So if you are interested, you can go online. You are able to apply or book tickets for up to 1 match per day during this period, and you can book for up to 4 people. So if you have friends or loved ones that are also football fans, you can book for them at the same time. The pricing is actually quite affordable at the lower level. There's a huge range though. So one example is in the group stages, where you can get tickets from anything from €30 to 100 or €50 to 600 for the actual opening match in Munich. Then it sort of goes up on a sliding scale with these cheaper tickets and then going right up to the hundreds. If you want tickets for the finals, obviously everyone wants tickets for the finals. They start at €95, but they go way up to €1,000 if you want that absolute VIP experience.
Do you get valet parking with that?
I would hope so.
A glass of champagne.
I would hope that the football players going to lift you up and then take you to your seat on their shoulders and sort of shower you with champagne.
I would pay $1,000 for that.
I think I would, yeah.
Gift idea for Christmas.
Exactly. How likely is it that people will get a ticket then?
Well, I'd say if you are really, really keen to get a ticket, your best chance is probably to apply now, even though there will be other ticket sales rounds later. So another one in March aimed at kind of the fans of the people who qualify, and another one right before the tournament. So right now, as I say, 1.2 million tickets on offer. That's going to be the most that are on offer throughout the whole period of sales. And that gives you the best chance, really, of getting a ticket. The one catch is that you won't know what matches you are booking for because we don't necessarily know who's playing who. The only given is this opening match, which will involve Germany. So that might be a good one to book for. That is the sort of catch for playing now.
Mm-hmm. Is this competition taking place in any particular part of the country or all over?
All over, which is great. So wherever you live in the country, there's probably going to be a match near you. As I mentioned, the opening match is going to be in Munich on June 14th, and the finals will be in Berlin on July 14th. Along the way, we're going to have matches in all major German cities, pretty much. There'll be Düsseldorf, there'll be Frankfurt, there'll be Hamburg, Leipzig, Dortmund, Stuttgart, and Cologne, and even Gelsenkirchen. So, yeah.
They got a big stadium.
Cool.
Definitely. So you should be able to find a stadium near you, regardless of where you are. And you can find the full schedule on the UEFA Euros website.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Imogen. Looking forward to the Euros.
I know, me too. Having it in Germany and the final in Berlin.
Woo-hoo.
That's going to be
and
great.
Maybe Scotland will get over here. Imagine that.
We'll see.
In the final, you say?
Let's not go too far, Rachel.
Many of our listeners will know the feeling of being intrigued to visit Berlin, or maybe they've even packed their suitcases and made Berlin their home. Author, broadcaster, and foreign correspondent John Kampfner's new book, In Search of Berlin, the Story of a Reinvented City, digs into why people from all over the world have been drawn to this complicated and fascinating place. I started off by asking John what attracted him to write about Berlin.
Well, I have a very long history with Berlin and with Germany. A few years ago, some listeners may recall, I came out with a book which made a few waves called Why the Germans Do It Better, Notes from a Grown-Up Country, which became bizarrely a bestseller in Brexit Britain. But probably it was predominantly the 48% who embraced it, but you never know. Because Britons have a curious relationship with Germany. And I have been coming and going to Berlin. Gosh, I'm so old, but I was a young correspondent in the GDR in East Berlin before the wall came down. I was there in 1988 and 89. And I saw all that happening. I saw unification, which I think, in spite of legitimate complaints people have, to be one of the great success stories of modern times. I struggle to think what sort of clownland Britain would have done in such a scenario. And I've been coming to and from Berlin all the way through. And then Brexit sort of prompted me to sort of think and reconnect with Germany. And I've never looked back.
So do you still feel like there's a lot that you're kind of trying to get to know in Berlin? Do you think that kind of is never ending?
Oh, it has to be never ending. I mean, well, I would say that would apply to any city. I mean, God, if you think you know anything, I mean, I've lived about 150 years in London. If I think I kind of, know all of that. No, I mean, there's still a lot more. It must be said, though, that over the last 5 years, I think I have trodden more streets in Berlin and gone to more places than Ur-Berliner have ever done. I mean, you know it very well. Most people stick to their Kiez, to their local area, hang out there. I mean, God, I have been left, right, and center. I've been all the way around Brandenburg to a place called Wittstock, to the west, where the 30 Years' War had one of its famous battles, and in a former castle, they've got a museum. I went to the former Soviet military base in the south of the city called Wunsdorf. I've been to Spandau and Köpenick, the two original fortifications that started the city, and everything in between.
Do you have a favorite street or area of Berlin that you're really drawn to?
I have so many, but if I was forced to name one, it was where I had a wonderful apartment. Sadly, I had to give it back in Bergmannkiez, Camisolplatz. It was just amazing cobbled streets. You know, a place is gorgeous when there's constant film sets going on. Every 19th century period drama in Berlin seems to be filmed there. And it was, as listeners know, I mean, it's slap bang between all kinds of interesting parts of Kreuzberg and Tempelhof with all its madness, and really not very far from Mitte either, with great connections, and just so sort of so much fun. But I mean, there's so many parts. I lived in Prenzlauer Berg before it was hipster, when it was properly run down and close to the wall. I used to hang out a lot in divided Berlin in Savignyplatz in Charlottenburg, which has retained still something of a particular charm. There are so many places.
You mentioned the statistic that more than a quarter of the population in Berlin has a migrant background. Why do you think so many people from all over the world are attracted to come to Berlin, both in the past and now probably more than ever?
Yeah, I would say this is the sort of main motif of my 800-year, somewhat unconventional history. Berlin is a city of trauma. It has unleashed, as we all know, famously, infamously in the 20th century, so much trauma. But at the same time, it has always been, and not just in modern times, but in the past, it has always been the place where the traumatized have gathered. I mean, the Huguenots trying to find some place to live when they were kicked out from France, the Russians after the revolution in 1917, the Jews all the way through in medieval times. Whatever the horrors of the 20th century, Berlin was regarded as more enlightened, or a little bit less unenlightened, than so many other parts of Europe at the time. Now you have, in 2015, the Syrians, the Afghans, the Iraqis, and others, and now the 1 million+ Ukrainians. It's always been, but it's not just those sort of refugees in that sort of conventional sense. There's so many people I know, whether they're Italian or Brits or French or Australians or whatever, Israelis, who come to Berlin just because it's the place where you can discover yourself. I think the fact that it is so incomplete, it's so messed up in so many ways. It's so sort of unadorned in a way that Paris is so sort of beautiful, and New York feels so sort of big moneyed and in some ways sort of already complete. The incompleteness of Berlin is, I think, what attracts so many people.
It's a bit of a hot mess, I always say.
Well, exactly. I mean, the old, poor but sexy line, but it's absolutely. And it's a place I quote at the beginning of my book, the architect David Chipperfield, famous for the Neues Museum and many other great Berlin and German buildings, as saying it is a place where you can paint onto. It is a canvas. It's been a horror city. It's been a military city. It's been a debauched city. It's been an incredible liberal city. And it feels now to be a kind of mixture of so many things. It's also quite a young city, but it's also a very, very chilled city. But it's a city in constant development.
Is there anything during your research and writing that really surprised you?
Yeah, loads, I suppose. I mean, I was surprised by the extent to which, the whole relationship with history is just so endlessly fascinating. I mean, I don't think there are many memorial places and places of extraordinary moment and usually horror that I haven't been to. and I mean that in the Nazi era and also in the GDR times. When I went to Hohenschönhausen, the Stasi prison, it was truly horrific because you're always shown around by someone who was a former inmate. And this woman who was showing us around, it was a December, it was sort of 5 o'clock, it was sleet. You all know the sort of Berlin maximum gloom moment. This was more than 30 years on. She was still full of rage. She was still crying, and she was still saying, you look out there, you look outside this prison premises. And there are people who incarcerated me who got great pensions and enjoying life, and I'm still. So really, it's that sense to which history is still hugely unresolved in Germany, and particularly in Berlin. I mean, huge amounts of work has been obviously done on the Holocaust and the war, but actually not that much has been done on the GDR. And there's another interesting historical battle going on about what industrialization and the Kaiserzeiten of the late 19th century did for Berlin. I mean, this was the only time after the first unification, 1871, until the First World War in 1914, it was the only time when Germany really was a Weltstadt, where it was a world city. It had everything. It had glamour, it had money, it had military, it had the economy, it had politics, it had science, culture, everything. It was like a great global city. And it's never been that before or since, although arguably you could say maybe it is now. But some people think it was a time of terrible sort of exploitation and inequality, and others say, actually, if you compare it to London and Paris and whatever else, it was still incredibly enlightened. So Berlin is kind of constantly reliving its history. And the weirdness about it is there's history everywhere, but you can't see it because most of the buildings, were long ago flattened.
I thought we'd round things off today with a little language chat about false friends in the German language that can make things tricky for both German and English speakers. Is there any that have caught you out or that you have noticed when chatting to native Germans, or maybe when you were learning German in the beginning that you got mixed up with?
Oh, yeah. I've been here 12 years and I started learning German as a kid with my grandparents, and I still mix up consequent and consequent. Even now, I still do that. In German, it actually means logical or consistent with, not as a consequence of something, the way that it means in English. So watch out for the consequences of that, ladies. Sorry.
Yes.
But I had to go there. The other one I sometimes trip up on is Übersehen. Now, it might sound like oversee.
Yes.
So like you got it all under control. It's all, you got it handled feeling, especially at work or something like that. In German, it actually means much the opposite. It means to overlook something. So to really miss out on something that you really should have seen. So if your boss comes to you and, accuses you of having übersehen something, it's not a good thing. It means that you missed something, that happened on your watch and you failed to spot it. So, watch out for that. Don't übersehen that, let's say.
Absolutely, which is funny because it does actually make sense in German as well as English, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like overseeing and overlooking.
Yeah.
It does make sense, but it's just very confusing.
Yeah, definitely.
Imogen, what have you got for us?
Well, I've got a few. So much like Aaron, despite having lived here for years, there is one that continues to trip me up a little bit, and that is eventuell.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously, a lot like, consequent. Oh, I think I know what that means. No, I don't think you do. It does not, as you might imagine, mean eventually. It means that's endlich, or sort of finally. So don't say, oh, I eventually, found out, eventuell. It actually means possibly. So sort of related, but also very much not. So you could say, I'll turn up eventually, and your friends will think, oh, well, are you not going to turn up? Are you just like, if you had second thoughts? I thought you liked this bar. So that can be one that is a little bit tricky.
Yes.
Another one that I love, just because, a bit like Übersehen, it almost has the opposite meaning. So that's a nice one for German learners or English learners from Germany. And that is Gift.
Oh.
So obviously, yep. I know what that means. Yeah, I'll give that to my friend. Don't give that to your friend because it means poison in Germany. So almost the opposite of what you want it to mean. But one way in which it could work is that if you actually give some booze, some hard liquor,
some of the good stuff
as a gift, choose your poison. And I think in that case, we can see the two meanings converging. Otherwise, definitely don't mix this one up.
Absolutely. And there's a famous bar in Berlin called Das Gift. And I love that because it is just like the poison.
The poison.
It's cool.
Sounds rock and roll, baby.
It is. They used to do very good Scottish breakfasts, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't have Scottish owners anymore, but there you go.
Dang.
Still exists, though. I actually really love how Germans, and even those who speak perfect English, use the word chef to describe their boss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because that's what it means in German. But in English, a chef is a cook, and in German, a chef is a Koch. But to me now, I just think chef is just the boss, whether it's the boss of a kitchen or any manager.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What's funny about that, though, is that in German, the German master chef is not Meisterkoch, it's master chef. So, I mean, if you
The
were
master
German,
boss.
Exactly, the master boss man, like mega boss.
I mean,
Like,
that's
must
what a
sound
chef
so
is.
cool for people in Germany.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a chef is controlling everything.
it's
I
the
mean,
chief.
the kitchen, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, the actual kitchen chef, they know everything.
They're not just serving you dinner, they're
Controlling the world.
Yeah.
Well, when you think of it, I find that it helps to think of it as chief.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
'cause-
that must be where it comes from.
Yeah.
Originally.
So just try and associate chef with chief when you're talking in German.
Exactly. The other false friend that can be confusing, especially to German and English speakers, is the verb bekommen. It sounds like become,
Yeah.
but it is not. So it means to receive or get. And I always remember thinking that sie bekommt ein Baby was she becomes a baby rather than what it means she's having a baby or getting a baby, quite literally. So that is one that is funny and it can catch you out, especially in the beginning, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember sitting at Gatwick Airport and hearing a German couple next to me say, or the guy saying that he would like to become a beer. And I found it so charming and I thought,
charming.
Bless you. Wouldn't we all just like to disappear into a pint at this point when at Gatwick Airport? But
yeah. And it's something if you hear it, you know what someone is trying to say.
Absolutely.
Excellent. That's it for this week. Thank you to all our listeners. As always, we will add links in the show notes for the stories we've been talking about today. It would really mean a lot to us if you hit follow, left a rating or a review wherever you listen to your podcast. That's how other people can discover our podcast. This week's panelists have been Imogen Goodman and Burnett. Our guest was John Kampfner, and our sound engineer is Rhys Edwards. I'm Rachel Loxton, and we hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll be back next week. Until then, take care.